Hey guys and girls, Poker King here, back with another Flesh and Blood video. So Rosetta is out of print and the Hunted is going to be having its wave 3 come out. Supply, I think a lot of stores have started getting more supply now. A lot of stores I've heard have got pretty good, but we're not sure if that's still left over from wave 1 or wave 2. It's a bit blurry at the moment, to be honest. I think it's a little bit of a shit show. If I'm being honest, from what I'm hearing, because I'm hearing countless things from different stores across the world, and it just seems a bit muddy. It just doesn't really make much sense, to be honest. But there's not much stock, is the gist of it, and whatever stock does come looks like it's going to be eaten up pretty quickly. So I doubt there's going to be too much on shelves for very much longer. Rosetta as well. It seems to be whatever is out there is done. We just don't know with LSS because they have their warehouses now where product gets sent from LSS to their warehouses, then from the warehouses to distros. So it's a little bit difficult to know, and I don't know, like in a market like this where Flesh and Blood is doing well, it's a bit hard because you've got people that have seen these movements in the past and they'll know when to stock up. They'll hold stock sealed. So it kind of blurs the lines a little bit, and we don't really know exactly what's going on. Let me know in the comments below, like, what is happening with your local store. Have you got good supply? Can you get anything from distro if you run a store as well? I'd like to kind of get more of a gauge, because the people I've spoken to, it's just very mixed. And it really is a bit weird. It does feel like the Hunted was either underprinted or the wave system hasn't worked properly. I'm just not really sure what happened with this set, honestly. It just seems to have gone wrong from the get-go. The demand was a little bit higher, I guess, and they just couldn't meet that. Not sure. But the last 12 months, Flesh and Blood has been growing across the world. The player base, at least, anyway. We have seen a lot of dips in a lot of the collector stuff, but there is more collectors coming into the game as well. When you have an influx of players, there's always going to be people that also collect as well. I know quite a lot of people that have messaged me now via Instagram who I've followed for a few years now that do various card games, and I guess Flesh and Blood has perked their interest. Either their LGS stocks it, or maybe their Pokemon's out of stock now. It's hard to get Pokemon, maybe it's hard to get One Piece. So Flesh and Blood was there, and I think that's also kind of how the market works with a lot of card games, is when other TCGs do well, it does spill over for the most part. Like you're gonna get a spillover, and it makes sense that this is happening with Flesh and Blood. But the player base is growing, and it is a utility-based card game. So I said since Misfail, honestly, UK Games Expo last year, Misfail, sales have increased, month on month, to the point where January and February was two of my best sales for Flesh and Blood, and March seems to be carrying on the same, which is great for the game. But it does feel like we're kind of at a little bit of a standstill here now, where there doesn't seem to be enough supply, and there's a lot of expensive cards in this game. And I read through the Discords, I read through the Facebook groups for not just only Flesh and Blood, but a lot of card games, and the one resounding beating of drums, what I hear across card games, is it's too expensive to play. So I wanted to talk about this today because I've had this conversation a million times, and we've had this conversation a million times. But for those of you that haven't and haven't watched my content before, essentially, hobbies are expensive. Hobbies cost. That is the reality of it. It's not a if, but, or maybe. It simply is. Hobbies are a luxury and they cost money. Whatever hobby you collect, it costs money. Simple as. That's the way it is. And supply and demand works exactly the same way. If demand is high and supply is low, things cost money. That's just the way it is. However, if supply is high and demand is low, then things are cheaper. That's just the way it works. Card games can't avoid this. They're part of it. It's just the way it happens. Anybody that collects Lego is expensive. Comic books are expensive. There's so many different variants. If you want to go back and get back issues, you've got first editions. Like, first appearances. It's expensive. Video games are expensive. Video games are very expensive. Every hobby that I know of is expensive. Now, if you want to get good at something, whether it's a hobby or a sport, it's going to cost money, right? That's the reality of it. So if you want to be good at this game and you want to compete at a high level, it's going to cost. You're going to have to buy expensive cards. Travel is going to cost. Competing is going to cost. That's just the reality of it. Now, Flesh and Blood is on the upper end of expensive card games, but you look at the kind of players that play the card game. They are high quality players. They are professionals. For a lot of people, this is very serious for them. And that's why they do so well. And that's why you get the same people that win a lot of these events. Because they're high skilled. There are other card games where the card game costs cheaper, for instance. You look at Pokemon. Pokemon's very cheap to play. Now, they run a rotation system, not a Live and Legend system. They run a rotation system. So, they have blocks. And that is something that One Piece is also doing. They've just announced that. And Star Wars Unlimited is going to be following. This ensures that you don't have power creep, which kind of is happening in Flesh and Blood if you look at it in reality. If you look at a lot of what does well in events, I mean, the recent event in Japan, it's Misfail heroes, it's Rosetta heroes, They're the top ones. So the most recent heroes are the ones that are doing the best. So that's just the way it is. And everyone else wants to do that. Now, this is, as I said, this conversation I've had so many times. I've been running Katsu since I got into Flesh and Blood. Katsu's not really viable, so I'm not really playing too much CC. I really enjoy doing sealed events. I just love them. But I am not an extremely competitive player. Now, if I was, I would have to understand that it's going to cost money to play. Now, I know people that, Jakub, Kuba, he runs Azalea. He's blinged out his deck to probably, I think, almost the maximum at this point. But he didn't have to, you know what I mean? Like, he's been running the same hero for a while. But if you want to compete, you're going to have to run you're going to have to run the meta. And everyone else, guess what, wants to run the meta. So everyone wants to run the same 4 to 6 to 8 heroes. And it's going to cost because you're competing with everybody else in the game that wants to play these same heroes. And when a new set comes out, especially in places like the UK, where you haven't got enough supply of singles because there aren't enough collectors. There are not enough people cracking product. You've got stores, like Living Realms, you've got Thistle, you've got Mox and Hole, Flesh and Blood cards, Spellbound as well, and myself included, who will crack product on release and afterwards to supply singles. But it isn't enough. So it comes to a point where the demand is shooting up, but the supply isn't going to meet that. So if Flesh and Blood print more, does that solve the issue? Not necessarily. Because is it going to make people open more product? Probably not. Let's be honest. The average player doesn't open too much product. But the game costs money. It is just the reality of it. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to find another hobby, unfortunately. Because Flesh and Blood will never be a cheap card game to play. There might be points of it where it's cheaper, and there might be points of it where it's more expensive. But this is never going to be a cheap card game to play. And that's the way that LSS and James White want the game to be. They want to have... If you had the game extremely cheap to play, then the caliber of players you're going to have involved in is going to be a lot lower. Whereas if it's a lot more expensive, people have to second guess, do I really want to put the money and time into this card game? Well, if I want to be good, I'm going to do it. And that's the reality of it. But the surprise support for Flesh and Blood is really good. And it is one of the best out there. I mean, you can play Yu-Gi-Oh! And win an air fryer if you want, because they're not allowed to give prize support. Because the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was like, we don't want money being given for prize. So you can win an air fryer if you want. That's fine, If you want an air fryer over cash and a gold foil, that's absolutely fine. But there's a reason why so many people come over from Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And other competitive card games. Because Flesh and Blood is the premier card game. It is the premier competitive card game. And that's, when you sign up and get into this card game, that's what it is like. But I always see countless... Always reprint this, reprint that. Everything needs to be reprinted. Cards shouldn't cost more than 50p. Get over yourself. The entitlement is ridiculous. Like, it's boring to see. Like, there's definitely certain cards that are more expensive than they should be. And I'm not saying everything should be expensive. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying there are ways around this here. Like, Codex of Frailty is probably going to get a reprint. Let's be honest here. This Mastery sets that they're going to do, I think they're going to do one per year, and they are going to reprint stuff in them. So it's Guardian this year, they'll probably reprint some of the Guardian stuff. They'll also probably reprint a lot of generics. You know, that's what's going to happen. So Codex of Frailty will probably get reprinted. Maybe E-Strike will get a reprint. It's not like Flesh and Blood have never reprinted stuff before. They tried History Pack 1 and it didn't work. It didn't sell. Nobody wanted it. Either people didn't want white border, or they didn't want non-foil. So it just didn't work. I remember seeing boxes sat on shelves and they just didn't sell. So a lot of it got shipped back to America from the UK. And then that's when you started getting people going, well, I haven't seen it in stores. Yeah, because when it did come out, nobody wanted it. So, you know, the same as a lot of this Uprising, Outsiders, Dynasty, you know, Bright Lights, Dusk Till Dawn. A lot of this got shipped back to the US from UK distributors because the demand was so low over here. It just wasn't wanted. It wasn't needed. People weren't cracking boxes. Stores weren't ordering because people just wanted the most recent sets. They wanted heavy hitters when it came out. They wanted Misfail. They wanted Rosetta. So, you know, that's the reality of it. Monarch and Tales of Aria boxes, first edition, are still cheap because there's a lot less playable cards in there. It is a utility-based card game. That's just the reality of it. So, you know, Flesh and Blood will reprint stuff, but calling for every card that hits £10 to be reprinted is stupid. Look at the gold foil market right now. We've seen absolute crashes on so many gold foils, and all I see is want to sells on gold foils, and nobody wants to buy them. But nobody had issues of those being expensive. So when people had to sell them, when people won an event and had to sell their gold foil, they wanted the highest price possible, right? And a lot of the time, they weren't willing to sell it sealed. They wanted to open it. Oh, okay, if I get a crap one, I'll sell it for cheap. If I get it, you know. But that's the reality. People don't want that. People are less likely to buy it if it's not sealed. And now we've seen the top 3-4 guys buying less gold foils, or maybe being a bit more picky because they realise that supply is essentially infinite on gold foils now. You know, there's a lot of crap ones out there that you do not want. Whether it is a common, majestic, or a legendary. Nobody wants Coat of Frost. Just, you know, there's so many of them. And I try buying gold foils, but the prices I see people asking for them are well above, you know, what they should be worth. And I get it because it's very hard to kind of price the market on this. Because a lot of them don't necessarily sell publicly. With Flesh and Blood, it's a little bit difficult because a lot of the stuff that's worth more than £100 sells privately, or it will sell through Discords or Facebook groups or at events. So it's a bit harder to track, especially if you're outside of, you know, the US where you don't have TCG player. But this game is expensive, and that's just the way it is. And I know I'm going to get a lot of people in the comments complaining, whatever, like, I just don't care. Like, I've been in this game now 5 years, and I've seen it when cards were really cheap. I've seen it when cards were really expensive. And at both points, people were complaining. So it doesn't matter. And it's not just Flesh and Blood. I see it in Magic as well. I see people calling out for cards that shouldn't be worth more 50p. I see in One Piece, now they're adding a rotation system, and players are complaining that their valuable cards are going to be worth less now. But isn't that what you wanted it, for cards to be cheaper? So pick a lane and stay in it. Don't blur the lines and jump from jump. You can't want the most money when you're selling a card, but want the least amount of money when you're trying to buy a card. It doesn't work like that. And it's, you know, it does get annoying as well. And the whole, like, UK to Europe thing, there is a gap in pricing. You can buy from Europe. Shipping is a little bit more expensive. It may take a little bit more time. And if you're buying bulk, it might impart import fees. That's going to happen. But you're buying from the UK from convenience, right? And I know most UK sellers will work on pricing if you buy from them regularly and buy from multiple cards off them, if that makes sense. But it's the same old thing. Everybody wants the same cards all the time. You know, one thing gets leaked, one gets, you know, there's a murmur of something, you know, something gets leaked to Ranger and suddenly everyone's buying the same cards. It's like, well, you understand how that works, right? If 100 people try buy the same thing at once, the price is going to go up. That's literally how markets work. And whether you like money or not, or whether you're on the eat the rich mindset, it doesn't matter. You know, Card games and hobbies cost money. There is money involved in this card game. Like it or not, it's just the reality of it. So I hope there are some reprints. Codex Authority definitely will get a reprint, and probably a lot of the other generic stuff will get reprints, and in Armory decks as well. Armory decks, we're going to see it. We've already seen cards like Mangle. I think Art Lighting got reprinted in the Aurora deck. So it's going to happen. Like, they are reprinting stuff, but they can't just reprint everything. At the end of the day, they want the game still to be collected, and they want some value to their cards. You look at Pokemon, and people call for reprints all the time, right? So Pokemon during Sword and Shield went mental. They did reprints, and by the time the reprints came, because it does take time, you have to book printer slots. You can't just go, wake up tomorrow and go, right, I need 10 million box of this now. It just doesn't work like that. That's not the reality. People have this warped sense of like how the world works in their heads, and it's just far from the truth. It really is. They think, well, if I want it this way, it should be like this. And that's just not the way it works. But, with Pokemon, and then the reprints came, and suddenly stores couldn't sell boxes. They had got back orders for things like Lost Origin, Silver Tempest. Distro was like, cool, you need to pay for the 30 cases that you back ordered. Stores are like, oh, well, it's not as popular now. Well, it doesn't matter, you have to pay for it. And then suddenly there's Fire selling boxes for below what they paid for from Distro, just so they can claw some money back for the next set. And it's a vicious cycle, And by that point, nobody cared. Nobody wanted it. It's the reality of it in card games and all hobbies. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. At the end of the day, the positive is the game is doing well. It is growing. And there's a lot of people that will say, oh, well, the game won't grow anymore if cards prices stay expensive. Well, guess what? Cards have been expensive for a long time in this game, and the game's still growing. So clearly that's wrong. Because people will either leave, complain, and go to another card game, and then complain in that card game that the game's expensive, or they'll stay and suck it up at the end of the day. And also, if you open packs and you pull a hit, you can trade. That exists, right? Trading exists. I've got most of my collection through various card games, through actual trading. It's a weird and bizarre idea, really. Obviously, trading in trading card games. Like, I've never heard of that before. But that's just the reality of it. And that is where Flesh and Blood is. So the game is growing. We probably need more Rosetta stock. We probably need more the Hunted stock. And, high seas will probably be the same. The price went up, actually, on boxes. And the demand went up. So all the people that were like, oh, well, the price has gone up by $10 a box. No one's going to buy it anymore. Or I might not buy it now. It's still sold out. It literally sold out. So your opinion is irrelevant, and it doesn't matter. Because there are always going to be people that will pay that price. And that's the reality of it. So thank you all for watching. As always, please comment, like, subscribe. Drop a comment below. Tell me to fuck myself. I don't care. Bring the hate or whatever. But if you actually generally understand the sentiment of what this video is about, then, thumbs up to you. You can kind of take yourself out of a situation and assess it properly, rather than just use emotion, because there's far too much emotion sometimes in these things, and it isn't personal. None of this is personal. Nothing in life is personal. And as always, have a great day.